Today's presenter is Saul Corbin. Saul worked for 15 years in academia as a psychology professor before transitioning to nonprofit work. He has done workforce development training and program management as a training coordinator with the Behavioral Health System of Baltimore. He now facilitates bystander intervention, community safety, restorative justice, and trauma-informed care work. His vision is to help others build and maintain healthy relationships with conflict transformation as the primary focus. He holds degrees in clinical and educational psychology. Saul, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm going to jump right into it. De-escalation and conflict transformation, it's not a topic that I need to sell. Just turn on your news. For some of us, just look around town. And for many of us, just look across the table. A lot of conflict that we talk about, the source of it is actually internal, sometimes with family and friends. Having said that, I'm not going to approach this from a traditional perspective. I love acronyms. They make the steps of any process easier to remember, but I have found them not as helpful in the actual application. When talking about conflict, oftentimes it's very immediate and unexpected. This will capture both immediate, short-term, and long-term conflicting situations and how to deal with them. But my background's in psychology, so I really want to talk about this from an interpersonal level, which means it's going to come down to two things. What's going on with you? And what's going on with them. That's simplified, and we'll get into it. In this presentation, no acronyms. If you want information like that, you can ask for my contact information. I'd be more than happy to apply it. But in an hour, let's be real. We're not going to be resolving world problems in an hour, but we can walk out of this time and space together with maybe a different perspective, maybe a new tool, maybe a different approach, or maybe just an understanding or compassion for the other. There's at least two parties involved, right? And if we're talking about ourselves, that's us and the other person. Sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes it's groups in opposition. What I have found in my journey is that everybody wants to be heard, but we're not too good at listening. We're really good at delivering our message. That doesn't mean that it's always received the way we mean for it to be. We're not spending as much time creating that space to hear the other side. And there's always another side. 9 times out of 10 is not going to be in sync with yours. The other probably doesn't or didn't experience your differences in the same way that you are. It might have been more or less intense for them emotionally. It might have been just another day for them and it was everything to you, or vice versa. You might be looking for an apology or some type of reconciliation that may never come. So there are things that I'd like to talk about today for us to empower ourselves in those exchanges. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, you'll have to click on this one, Mike, to get all the bullets up. I apologize. So there are like 5 of them. I'm not even going to get into these in the interest of time. But basically, we want to look at, well, what are the different typical approaches, the styles for managing conflict? I really want to spend time on number 3. What are our own strengths in resolving these differences, and what are areas we need to improve? If I were to ask you, what do you bring to the table? Most of you probably would be able to answer that, whether that's a soft tone, staying calm, direct communication, or whatever your strength is, right? It's wonderful. We are all blessed with gifts that are meant to be given to others, right? However, we also know there are some areas that need improvement. Personally, for me, that's impatient. I'm impatient, right? So I want immediate resolutions. I want immediate input. And what that means is that potentially I cut off people based on their pace. I do this for a living, and I'll tell you, I'm a terrible interrupter in my personal conversations. Professionally, I'm great. But personally, I'll interrupt you in a minute. Why? Because I'm a fix-it person and I got questions, which means I'm trying to move into direct mode. And that often will be a barrier to communication, right? Because the other person will either shut down or feel shut down by my intrusions. Definitely want to talk about number 4. Let's learn how to shift. I'm going to talk about that passionately. And also number 5, creating a space. Next slide, please. All right, a couple quotes. Go ahead and click on. Thank you so much. So, just to plant some seeds, just for food for thought, right? So, I know that we're very judgmental of others that irritate us and annoy us. There's things that they do that we just can't stand or get under our skin. I love this quote. You can't see it in them unless you have a little bit in you. The only thing I'm saying here is I'm not saying, oh, it's all about you and your fault. What I'm saying is your ability to identify faults in others comes from the ability often to identify it in ourselves. I can't stand folks that are judgmental and hypocritical. Two of my pet peeves. And yet I find myself being judgmental all the time. I have to catch myself and stop it. What I'm trying to do is build space for compassion and acceptance for the other. I know we're charging in there with our agenda. And for those of you saying, I don't have one, yes, you do. All of us have an agenda when we're in exchange with others. Be subtle, it might be loud, it might be direct, it might be soft, but we got a reason why we're there. And there's something that we're hoping to get out of it. So, yeah. Second quote, never wrestle with a pig because you both get dirty, but the pig likes it. Now, what do I mean by that? Folks, there are others out there, hopefully not you, but they love a fight. They can't wait to stir up emotions. They can't wait to say no to your yes, your red to your blue, up to your down. That's what their purpose is. I often call them the troublemakers or button pushers. Folks, you got to avoid the button pushers at all costs. Now, sometimes that's not easy, especially if they're in family or on the same team. But some people are looking for conflict, and often we get sucked right into it. As I've come to identify those persons in my world, I try to stay out of their path. I deal with them when I have to. I can be insane on my own. I don't need somebody else to put up that. We get sucked into other people's drama and insanity and madness and differences and opinions so easily, but you own that. You control that. If you're on the phone with somebody that you're arguing with, do you realize you don't have to stay on the phone? You can hang that up with a number of different reasons. Hey, I'm sorry. There's somebody at the door. Can I get back to you later? I have another meeting. We're getting ready to have dinner. There's all kinds of mechanisms that we have that are in our control to navigate differences with others that we don't often use. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I apologize for the delayed bullets. I didn't forewarn that. Thank you so much. So just some opening thoughts. This first one from Michael J. Fox, the actor. He says, with gratitude, optimism is sustainable. And out of optimism, I want you to hear hope. All right. So when there's no hope, there's no life. What do I mean by this? Not all differences, not all conflicts are salvageable. Sometimes you're just not going to reconcile with people. Now, what you can do is reconcile differently with different people in your life. What I was able to achieve with my father in his lifetime was a world away from what I was able to achieve with my mom. My dad and I ended up being best friends. My mom stayed the same until she passed. What I was able to do with her was shift my approach to how I interacted with her. When there's no hope for resolution or change in the relationship, then people stop trying. And usually the choices they embrace become even more unhealthy. If you have hope, stay in it, but some fights aren't worth fighting. I used to get caught up in road rage, driving in and out of traffic, changing lanes, giving people, friendly finger gestures and other things. And I did that when I was a younger man for a long time. And then one day it just dawned on me, why am I getting into it with people on the road that I will never see again for the rest of my life? It's just not worth it. Why am I wrapped up in this? To have the last say, to say I cut you off last? Now we live in times where people take matters into their own hands. It's not just finger gestures that are being exchanged, it's guns and knives. It's crazy. The point there being that not every fight has to be fought. Choose your battles, folks. Choose them. If you can't choose it, try to massage it. Try to avoid it. Try to change your approach. We're going to talk about that a little later. Crises are opportunities for growth and reconciliation. If this was an interactive workshop and I were to ask you all, how would you describe conflict? 90% of you will come back with negative terms. It's annoying, irritating, frustrating, it's angering. Conflict typically doesn't feel good. But the flip of it, right? If you flip that script, crises and differences are opportunities for growth and reconciliation. I'll give you a personal example. When I'm sharing a mission of anything that I'm on, any campaign that I'm on, I don't mean that politically, I just mean, some purpose in my life. You know what? I want the resistance in the room with me. Why? Because resistance is the most irritating group opposing what you think. for whatever reason, sometimes good, sometimes not. The reason I want them in the room is because that's the opportunity for me to inform them in a way that they get the passion of my message. I can't do it if they're not there. And if they're not there, it means we're probably standing on opposite sides with the river with megaphones barking at each other, right? So I want them in the room so that I can possibly create a space for you to understand. Doesn't mean you're going to agree, sign on, or anything like that, but at least you can understand why this is important to me. And if that is received in the right way, maybe it'll become important to you. You'll find that most people want the same things. They just want to go about different ways of achieving it. We all want to be safer in our communities. And for some people, that's more guns, and others, that's less. Like, it's the how is where the differences are, not the what. We need to start with the what. Find the common ground first before we launch into our differences. But you all know we're showing up to the event already polarized, ready to take on the other side. Third, it says, ask yourself, and this is just for your internal voice, is it worth it for you to have a different kind of relationship with this person? So remember I said choose your battles. I want you all to think of people that you're in conflict with. Come up with 3 or 4 if you have them. This could be your next door neighbor. It could be your mom over dinner. Is it worth it for you to have a different kind of relationship with this person? To enter into an exchange where you can be heard and they can be heard as well. That to me is one that I'm going to put work into if it's worth it. But sometimes it's not. We get so wrapped up in that and cause more stress to ourselves. The second question is very important because it's the foundation of everything that I'm talking about here. Can I initiate that conversation and exchange? For those of you saying, well, I'm not going to initiate it, well, you've already determined the outcome. So again, is it worth it for you? Can you initiate that exchange? Be humble. Humble doesn't mean you're giving in. Humble just means you're not charging in with your pitchforks. So be humble, meaning there is another perspective, and listen to it. And listen to it as you would want to be listened to. Let me repeat that. Listen to their perspective as you want your perspective listened to. That's what I see as failing in daily communication. So you think of a recent situation in which you experience conflict, right, and provide a descriptive word. Remember I said that probably that descriptor is negative. Next slide, please. Here are the rules of conflict, right? This is just a working definition for this time and space. I'm sure that there are others that are more lengthy and detailed and better. But for purposes of this time and space, where one party perceives its interest as opposed or set back by another. And the key word there being perceives, right? Conflict is about perception, right? This is why we have differences, because it's not only in how we process things, how we think about things, how we approach things, but it's also the perception of what just happened. Maybe for them, they were just having a regular conversation with you. And for you, you were offended at everything that they said. Observers could come watch that exchange and say, well, they were just talking to each other. While others would say, oh my gosh, he was so insulting. I can't believe the terms and labels that he used. So it is a matter of perception. And we're going to talk about the emotional content of that in just a minute. But if it's about perception, then perceptions need to be heard in order to be resolved. Now, our conflict can either be functional or dysfunctional, as a psychobabble, for healthy or unhealthy, where it can be resolved in healthy ways or unhealthy ways, but it's inevitable. It's going to happen anywhere you go. We don't move forward or backwards as a people without it. And again, don't have to look far for it. In fact, conflict in the home sometimes is the most intense because the boundaries are less clear. And people feel entitled to say or do things they wouldn't do in outside relationships. So it's inevitable. Human nature is flawed. We're not perfect beings. No, we're flawed by nature. Being human is flawed, which means you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to get everything right. And I don't care what your practice is. Pick it. Relationships, parenting, money, health. Just keep going. Right? We're not always going to get those things right. If you accept the fact that you can get them wrong, then you got to create a space for reconciliation, for redemption, for understanding, for apologizing. Because I know the people that have hurt us, we want something from them. We want an apology, we want money, we want understanding, we want acknowledgement. Do we create that same space for the other side? Misery loves company. When people are in conflict, they start rallying their troops for their side, right? They need to build up consensus that you have have been wronged. And so we start gossiping, we start sharing, you won't believe what so-and-so said to me. And then number 4 is probably the most important thing on this slide. The only thing you have control over is you. That's why I don't spend time with acronyms and a whole bunch of other stuff, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that you can control. That's the only thing that you can shift, is how you show up. Trust me when I say it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. It's not what you're doing, it's how you're showing up. These are some conflict precursors, some antecedents, things that contribute to conflict. And again, very short list, right? But important ones. Sometimes it's just it's reduced to personality. I'm sure all of you have been in a space, let's say a happy hour or a cocktail party, and you've met somebody for the first time and you feel like you've known that person forever, like you grew up with them or something. It just flows. You got chemistry, it clicks. And what? We also have met people, you're not even 5 minutes in, you just don't like them. There's something that just doesn't work, right? A lot of that's due to personality. That's how we're wired. That's how we show up. I'm talkative, lovable, at least I think I am. I'm impatient, I'm impulsive. Those are parts of my personality that show up in everything that I do. And some people really like that, and some people are like, right? So personality. Miscommunication, that's what this space and time is talking about here. Unclear messages, right? This is the most costly thing in work environments. Actually, I would say personal and professional environments. Unclear messages. And a lot of that's because we do not establish the boundaries. Boundaries need to be at work and at home. We don't have time to get into it today, but a boundary is expected. It's an expectation you have for the function of that relationship. Boundaries only work if they are expressed, agreed to, and enforced. Just because you express a boundary doesn't mean the other person's going to agree with it. They have to respect that, right? And then it has to be enforced. So you turn on the news, any war-torn area of the world, racial equity, any kind of ism, ageism, sexism, anytime you see a group trying to fight for their rights, that's competition or access to resources. Right? And when I say resources, I'm not talking about just material goods or money or wealth. I'm talking about identity, worth, right? Like, as a Black man, I want to be acknowledged as a human being that is like anybody else. But sometimes in the groups that we're in, especially if they're marginalized, we have to fight for the right to exist. You cannot escape the power dynamic. It's everywhere, right? And just think of power in this way. Think of how your language and behavior changes depending on who enters the room. Shifts, right? If your mom enters the room, you're acting differently. If your brother enters the room, if your best friend enters, notice how the posture and language changes. If your boss walks in the room, if for those of you who believe in a particular faith, if that faith leader walks in the room, all of that changes how we show up, right? So the power dynamic, whether it is intentional or unintentional, direct or indirect, is always there. And this last one is so important, folks, because you can throw everything else that I've said out the window if you do not acknowledge this last one. You got to know what your triggers are. You got to know where you've been bruised, hurt, broken in your past that keeps coming up in the present. Those are unresolved conflicts, unresolved trauma, unresolved things that have happened to you that still show up. And if you've not visited it through coaching or counseling, it's just going to sit there and probably get worse. But think about it. You can do all the prep that you want to manage exchanges. And as soon as that person brings up that thing, that word, that label, that experience, you go ballistic. You go right out the window with all the content, all the information, and now you're operating from emotions. And emotions, unfortunately, don't have nice structure to them or categories or acronyms that can filter their delivery. Feelings, and if I'm in my feelings, I'm going to say and do things that are very destructive, right? And probably not care about the outcome in that moment. So know your triggers, because otherwise all the practice can go out the window. Know what's going to happen when your mom or dad brings up, that time that you got to have or whatever. Know what your triggers are so that you can either avoid them in the exchange or remember to stay calm once you hear them. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the outcomes of transformation? And I never really defined transformation. You've probably heard conflict management, conflict resolution, sometimes conflict negotiation. Transformation means the attempted resolution of that exchange, of that difference, in a way that minimizes the likelihood of reoccurrence. Right? So you're trying to resolve in a way that it doesn't come back, or if it does come back, it doesn't come back as bad or strong, as worse as it did. the first time. That's what transformation is about. Okay. So what are we hoping to get out of this? Agreement without being disagreeable. I call this acceptance. Now, acceptance sometimes, when I say you should accept their position, people hear that as agreement. That's not what it says. Acceptance is, hey, I get that is where you are with this particular issue based on your past, your journey that brings you here right now. That's acceptance. Acceptance, here's an acceptance statement. I get it. I hear that. Yeah, if I've been through what you've been through, I probably feel that way too. It's accepting that's where they are without agreeing to it. Don't confuse those. But a lot of times, you might remember that the agree to disagree movement came out in the 90s. That was like the big thing. Everybody was saying, oh, just agree to disagree. The problem with that's great for immediate conflict resolution. It doesn't solve anything. You agree to disagree, you walk away just as salty as you were before. And the next time you get together, guess what? So how about agreeing without being disagreeable, which means you're not holding on to something, because that resentment, that's the stuff that hurts people. Anything that you're holding on to right now, anger, resentment, rejection, insecurity, whatever, that's just a bomb waiting to go off if you've left it unattended or unresolved. It's just waiting to come back out and will show up in the next exchange, right? So you got to move past that in some way. That's why I say gain a new perspective, because if you're just holding on to what you know, then you're going to show up that way over and over again. One of the saddest things I've dealt with in counseling is people that have been hurt in their past. As a result, they build up these really high protective walls to protect themselves from being hurt again. Does it work? Absolutely, it works. The more walls and the higher they are, the more protected you become. But with all those walls, it makes it difficult for anybody to get through to you. So you then deny yourself the very intimacy that you probably craved to begin with. And I mean intimacy in terms of whatever that relationship has to offer. Stronger relationships, that's a no-brainer. Learning, right? So every time I have a difference with somebody, and I usually think that I'm right, however it's resolved, whether I came out wrong or whatever, like it's an opportunity for me to self-reflect and be like, oh, okay, how can I do that different or better? And when we do intervention, right? Intervention is wonderful because intervention doesn't have a guaranteed outcome. So I might come to say to you, hey, I think you need to talk to somebody. And you might take that 100 different ways. But I can tell by your reaction whether or not that was an effective way to communicate that. And I can say, ooh, Saul, maybe you should have used these words instead of that. Maybe that person, maybe you should just let them talk and you don't say anything. It's a wonderful way to learn about yourself. And then at the end, we want to maximize what we're trying to get out of that exchange. So if there's something we're working on together, everybody can express their feelings in a safe way. Safe doesn't mean no harm could come to you. Safe just means there's no redirect, no punishment, no isolation for expressing yourself. Okay, next slide. Okay, these are typical conflict responses. There's no right or wrong to these. Don't jump into these like, oh, that's terrible. It's a shark. Who wants a shark? No, there's a time to be all of these. A shark basically says my way or the highway. It's immediate, it's direct, it's loud. That's a shark. Notice if I said that for real, I probably got immediate results, meaning everybody probably took a step back, like some of you defensively, like, hey, who are you talking to? Some of you might have been fearful. Some of you might have been like, okay, take that on. You don't talk to me like that. Did it quiet the room? Absolutely. The shark gets immediate results, and there's a time to be a shark. Look, if I'm having a heart attack, I want a whole bunch of sharks around me. I don't want a whole bunch of people trying to figure out what to do. Jump in there and say, you see me getting ready to get hit by a bus? Now grab me. That's not time for conversation. Sharks do that. And if the decision-making process has gone on too long, it's time for somebody to take lead and say, oh, here's what we're going to do. Let's move on. Teddy bear, the exact opposite. All right, this is giving in. So remember I said choose your battles? Here you go. It really doesn't matter if you're going left or right. Why are you engaged in some conflict over that? Are you mad because they chose a less attractive street to drive? I mean, come on. That's cool. You drive, or let's go your way. Teddy bears are really wonderful also for short-term resolution, but both the shark and the teddy bear aren't good for long-term because they don't resolve the issue that is maybe plaguing that relationship or that exchange. But for immediate reconciliation, yeah, choose your battles. The turtle is withdrawing. I do this when I sense the de-escalation. Okay, let me repeat that because I might have sounded wrong. When I sense the Escalation, I will draw. So if we're getting into it, I might say, I'm sorry, I didn't want to start a fight. Let's start over. Why don't you go first? Withdrawing is not giving in. It's just saying, you go first. Let's take a different path. Let's take a step back. That's a wonderful mediator for de-escalation. Fox is the compromise. That's where you negotiate things. I'll give some, you give some. We both win. We both lose something. That's basically where the world works. And the wolf, the collaborator, that's win-win for everybody. A lot of people mistake the wolf because a wolf is a predator, right? And they say, oh, well, why would you pick a predator for collaboration? I'm not talking about their hunting. I'm talking about their pack. The pack is a collaborative unit. Every member has a role. Everybody has equal value. If the lead couple has pups, those pups are immediately adopted by the rest of the family. So there are no orphans. If either of the parents get killed or something like that, it's just a beautiful collaboration. The win-win for everybody is the hardest to come by. It's the easiest to say, hardest to navigate. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are our goals in de-escalating? When we are getting into it with somebody or watching others get into it with each other, there's probably some dehumanizing going on. We start to see the person as less than, or we have colorful titles for them, which we won't mention in this space, but I notice when I'm in a rush, everybody else becomes an idiot that's driving in front of me. Not because they are. They're probably driving safely and admiring the scenery. I'm like, oh, get out the way, idiot. Kind of rehumanizing takes place with our conflict. We start to devalue them. One of the ways to de-escalate is to hey, we all want the same thing here. We can get along, right? We can do better than this kind of thing. Remind people of their humanity. Sometimes that works by itself. Sometimes, not all the time. We want to shift the energy. So remember I said, if I get into it with you, I might withdraw. I might do that turtle thing and step back and say, I'm sorry. I jumped at you with the agenda. How's your day? How you doing today? Right? So shift the energy, create a different space for the exchange rather than just coming at people or them coming at you. Create space for potential conflict transformation. This is what I do when I'm resolving conflict with others and also with me. Say, you know what? Let's take a walk. Tell me more about how I can help you. So what you're doing is you're creating a different space so the person can be heard. If all they're doing is barking and shouting and they're on a megaphone, hey man, come on over here and tell me more about that. I want to learn more. I want to learn more. It's not acceptance. It's exactly what it says. I want to learn, which means I want to hear more. But now, instead of them barking it at everybody, they are saying it to one person. Think about that in your personal exchanges. And I say personal, I mean personal and professional. Can you create it? Sometimes I'll say, let's take a walk. Sometimes I'll say, you want some water or coffee? Sometimes I'll say, I was getting ready to go outside, get some fresh air. You want to come with me? Right? I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you can invite somebody into a different space to be heard. And then number 4, lead with your heart. This is important, folks. What I'm trying to say is this. I got this from a conference I was at. They had an indigenous plenary, and the guy that was on the plenary, he gets up there and he says, I used to think I was a tough guy because I could kick other people's behinds, right? But my elders taught me that a great warrior leads with their heart first, love first, right? Meaning that they lead with goodwill, good intentions first before they fight, right? So they try the heart method first. Hey, I want this to work out for everybody. Or are you just going in there, guns a-blazing? What's your intention? Remember that question at the very beginning? What are you leading with? When you approach people you have differences with, is it a soft approach? Is it a hard approach? Are you needing them to be wrong? Are you trying to direct them to rightness? Are you wanting to have the last word? What's your agenda? Soften that blow if you want to be heard and them also to communicate. But start with your heart first. Okay, next slide. All right. So remember I said in the beginning, this all comes down to what's going on with you. That is your agenda. What is it that you want? What do they want? Are you trying to win this exchange? Are you trying to look better than the other person? Some of us set up the fight, and we all do it. Let me give you a great example of this. I want you all to think of the one person that gets under your skin, right? As soon as you see them, you're irritated, right? This person enters the room and you start having a conversation with them. Here they come. And they know they owe me some money and they're going to walk right on by like they don't even, whatever you're thinking about this person, she thinks she's cute. Now, who is that conversation with? It's not with the other person because they haven't even said anything yet. You have started that fight in your mind. And you all know about the self-fulfilling prophecy. You're setting it up for failure. right? That's what I call setting up the fight, right? Try to get a different voice that's playing in your head when you see that person. Open it up a little bit, right? Because that voice is usually the antagonist for our behavior. We talked about the importance of emotions and said knowing your triggers. Don't get sucked into the emotional void. That's going to be a very different conversation. The way we offer offsetting that is centering. Centering is reminding yourself of that calm, peaceful self to do that work, to have that exchange. Some people do that through breathing. Some people look at a painting. Some people think of their grandmother. I don't care what the technique is, whatever works for you. Meditation, find a way to center yourself so that when you are triggered, you don't get sucked into the emotion of the exchange. Next slide. What's going on with them? Well, folks, I get that there are people out there that are persistent in their delivery. So was my mom. My mom never gave up any of her secrets. She was always right. She was persistent about you being wrong, and she took that to the grave. Right? She never changed. But, and there are those out there. Grant, I give you that. But trying to figure out the other without inviting him in that space to share, that's kind of on you, folks. There are all kinds of reasons why people are showing up that way. For me, first, I want to understand. If I can create that space to understand that before I jump into why are they that way, we all have good and bad days. On a good day, I'm going to be your best friend. I'm going to treat you to lunch. I'm going to give you a hug. On a bad day, don't talk to me. Don't expect more than a one-word response. I'm on the go. All of us are like that, right? We all have our light side and our shadow. In relationships, it's important to know both sides. I might think I'm a fun date, but if you're late, I'm going to be salty. People need to know all of that information to have informed exchanges with you. But if you are in conflict with another, you got to understand their history. How did they get there? Did they wake up, and the kids were sick and the husband's leaving them and they couldn't get their documentation and they don't have any money? If you want to know their history about why they're in that place or having that position, you got to what? You got to be willing to listen. You got to be willing to listen to what's going on with them before you jump into judgment. Empathize with them. Try to put yourself in their shoes. If I woke up and the kids were sick and my wife was trying to leave me and I had no money, yeah, I'd be a little salty too at the world. Right? I wouldn't be walking around with a big smile on my face like this is wonderful, right? So I mean, and I'm exaggerating, but I'm saying you want to understand why they are that way or showing up that way. You got to get into their world to see it from their perspective. A lot of people remember that Michael J. Fox thing with hope? Yeah, there's possibility from that. But some people don't have hope. They're discouraged, they're distraught, they're done, and they're like, I don't like this system anymore. And that's how they're showing up. And here you are just like, oh, they got attitude. Well, yeah. Rightfully so. Try to empathize, see from their perspective. Remain objective and don't take it personal. Those are bullets. I just got to be completely transparent with you. I don't do well myself either. And some of you are probably really good at it. Remaining objective, I learned as a trained mediator. Outside of that practice, I not only do I not remain objective a lot of times, I take it personally. You come at me with an attitude, I'm like, oh, who are you talking to? I get caught up in that just like you sometimes. As much as you can, hold on to your objectivity. Don't take it personal because a lot of times the person that you're in conflict with, it's not about you. Sometimes it's definitely about you, but other times it might be the system or their history or what this particular exchange has taught them before. People that don't trust have probably been hurt a lot by people and their trust has been violated by another. And now here you pop up and you're expecting the person to trust you, but that's not the space that they're in. You want to understand that space and meet them where they are and then go from there. All right, next slide. Let me wrap this up. Just some helpful hints. Be quiet and listen. You've heard me say that before. Ask questions to understand. I call this enrolling them in their own recovery. And sometimes in counseling, they say empowering the client. Helping me help you. Tell me what's going on. Give me what you got so that I can work with it. I don't want to assume. This is what we do in support work in particular is we assume the need and then we operate from that without asking. You assume they're hungry, so you give them a meal. But did you ask? Are you hungry? Or that they like the food that you bought them? Enroll them in their own recovery, especially if you want them to leave empowered. Take accountability, whether that's through action steps, offering a plan that might work. Here's something that worked for me. Offer something to them rather than just talking to them, right? Thank them after they fix it or you fix it. Next slide, please. Now, I just want to highlight this for a moment, folks. I know some of you think that you're good listeners. I do too. And guess what? Personally, I suck at it. I'm just being fully transparent. Why? Because I'm impatient. So I just jump right on in there. This is what true active listening looks like. The first one is that you look like you're listening. How many of us have conversations while we're checking our phone or staring out the window? We're not even looking at the person. Allow them to fully share without interruption. That's my biggest mistake. Just jumping in there with all kinds of questions and redirects. Let them finish. And once they finish or pause, say, is there anything else you wanted to share? Thank them for sharing and then reflect to make sure you understood that correct. I'm going to guess that most of us don't do that in our regular exchanges. Some of us, right? And I'm sure there are professionals in this audience that probably do this all the time professionally. As soon as I take out my professional hat, I'm yucking it up just like everybody else. But this is what true active listening is about. Next slide. Other techniques, how can I show up to support you better or different? That's my favorite question to ask anybody, anytime, coworker, family, friend, whatever. I asked my daughter, she's a grown woman, how can I show up as your father do different or better for you? Would you like to speak to my supervisor? If you can't handle it, pass it on to a colleague or somebody above you. What do you suggest? That's enrolling them in their own recovery. You seem angry. Let's start over. That's that pause. That's that withdrawal. Next slide. This is just repeating things we said before with gratitude, optimism, that is hope is sustainable, something to work towards, that these differences are an opportunity for growth and reconciliation. Most important, self-reflection, right? How can I do this different? If somebody's not listening to you, maybe you need to change your delivery. Then ask yourself again, is it worth it for you to have this exchange? If it's not, then stop attending to it. Stop getting sucked into it. It's not a battle you need to engage in. And number two, so important. Can I initiate, be humble, and listen? Next slide. There you go. All righty. How'd we do? Erica, Michelle? Thank you all for allowing me to share. Thank you for sharing in this space with me. And if you have any questions in the chat or other, just let me know. I'm here.
So we have a few questions, and if anyone else has questions, feel free to just throw those into the chat. We'd be happy to ask. So Saul, in recovery housing, we often experience NIMBY, so not in my backyard, folks. How would you recommend that we approach someone who is angry or completely opposed to a recovery housing program going into their neighborhood using some of the techniques that you've just taught us about?
For me, first, I want to understand their story, right? I got to know where they came from and what they've experienced before me. A lot of times in support work, they're operating off that history, whether the environment or the house or the process just didn't work for them. It was unappealing. It was sometimes even traumatizing. So first, understand how they got there. Be clear in how you offer your program or delivery. Invite them into what works or doesn't work for them and ask them what could be done differently. That is not an acceptance or agreement on your part. So you don't appreciate a 10 o'clock curfew. That's not something you want to do. What would you suggest? And then they'll respond, and then you can either meet that need. Well, I need 10:30. Okay, we can accommodate that. We have a policy for people that work late, travel, or commuting. Or I'm really sorry that we can't provide that. Part of this is learning how to say no too, right? And no isn't slam the door in their face. I'm sorry, that isn't something we can provide. Our rules and policies are at 10 o'clock, you have to be in. We get that doesn't work for everybody. That's not something I can change. I get your frustration, but that's just the way we do things here. If you go down the street to St. Matthew's, they have a program. There is no curfew. I don't know if that helps you, but yeah, there you go.
All right, thank you. How about situations where you've been wrong about something? Let's say you're the owner operator of a recovery house. You know that you were wrong in the way that you worked with a client or one of your staff members. What's a good way to approach that and maintain your role as the leader of the group there?
Yeah, I feel like most people hold on and harbor their hurt in a way that takes away from the exchange. This is what I call the heart to heart. There are situations where sometimes I have to say something like this. See, we're not going to get anywhere with this, but I am concerned. And this is how this has affected me. I was really hurt by that event. I don't think that I'm going to get better unless I have somebody to talk to about. I'm again making this up, and I can't seem to get that way with you. But how does that resonate with you? When I do relationship coaching, I have a 4-step formula. So, what's the observation? To me, my experience is that you're not listening, and that makes me feel unimportant to you. That's number 2. So, this is what I observe. This is what I feel, and the story I'm telling myself is that you don't care, right? That you don't care if we resolve this or not. But how does that land with you? Right. So you got to say what's happening based on your selfish experience. This is how that makes me feel. This is the story that I'm telling myself. And what do you think about that? How does that land with you? Because remember, this exchange is about 2 or more. It's not just you. And we make it all about us. I'll give you a quick example of this. If I were to ask everybody to identify 1 or more people that they've been hurt by, your hands would skyrocket with stories. If I say, how many of you have hurt somebody? You would have that story too, but your hand wouldn't shoot up to share it. It'd probably be like, yeah, I've done that too. We're on both sides. Be sensitive to the other.
Have you ever encountered a conflict that did not get resolved? If so, what was the outcome?
Sure. I mean, look, we're trying to create the best outcome for everybody. Is that always doable? No, because we're human beings, right? You know how this works. All this wonderful stuff that we've just talked about only works if the person wants to be on the other side of the table. That's why I try to build compassion for the other side, because I want them at the table. If they don't want to be there, how are you going to resolve that? The only thing you can resolve is you. That's what I had to do with my mom. There was no, she's going to come at the table and we're going to have a healthy conversation. It was going to be her way or the highway. So I shifted how I showed up because I didn't want us to always be at odds. I would come, I would be quiet, I would listen, I would agree with everything she said, even if I didn't agree with it. And then I would leave. I had no voice in that, but I at least got to have a peaceful time with my mom whenever I went over to see her. Because I don't want to go over there fighting all the time, so I had to shift me. But did that maximize us so we were best friends like I was able to achieve with my dad? No. So you have to have realistic expectations. How far you can get one person is not what you will get with another, and some are not, they'll never be resolved. But then you got to learn the power of letting go so that doesn't drag you through the dirt or mud for the rest of your life. Thank you. That's an excellent question.
All right, I think we've got time for one more question here. In recovery housing, we are asking our residents to be accountable, right? We're trying to hold them accountable and have them be accountable. Any suggestions or thoughts around how important it is for an operator or an owner of a recovery house keeping that same expectation for their staff and themselves?
Can you read the question again?
Sure. I think I'll kind of just break it down. The question is like a lot of times in a recovery house, the expectation is that the folks, the clients living in the recovery house, have to be accountable. But is it also important to make sure that the leaders and the staff of that recovery house are also holding themselves accountable? What are your thoughts?
First of all, if you're delivering a message that you're not honoring yourself, you have to do by example. If you're not setting the stage for that, meaning if you're not held accountable, you can't hold them accountable. They're going to see that. They're not children. They're going to know the difference. Number 2, the methods, the processes, the procedures, the boundaries, are those effectively expressed? Are they posted somewhere? Are they reviewed in a way that everybody's on the same page with it and understands what accountability means? Remember, those boundaries for whatever, accountability, enforcement, understanding, that applies to everybody. But what do we say? Expressed, agreed to, and enforced. And that agreed to is an important one because just because you say here are the rules doesn't mean people are going to abide by them. And you need to know where that difference is because that's where you're going to have the problems as much as possible. Yep. Thank you, Erica, for that. Yeah. How are you going to deliver something you don't know or don't have? Right? That's where damage gets passed on intergenerationally. When families, work environments, whatever, right? Just the same sin gets passed on. Thank you,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yeah. Whatever starts at the top trickles down to the bottom. If you've got a
And
healthy culture up there and you've
yeah,
got accountability and resolving conflicts, it trickles down through.
This is so important because a lot of leaders of organizations talk down to the staff. This is what we need to do, whether it's change the climate or change procedure, but then they don't do it themselves. I had a wonderful boss in a previous job who embraced just the value of training. And so, but not only did he train himself, he was in trainings all the time, but that was reflected from the top bottom. So he wasn't just saying to his staff, you all need to get trained. He was part of that process as well. We need to think about that in terms of our expectations for others. Are we holding it down like that as well? We want people to be honest with us. We value and need honesty. Are we as honest? We want trust. Are we trustworthy? It's an excellent point. Thank you, Amy.
Yes. We want to just thank you for doing the webinar for us today. There's in the chat, you'll have some time to read it, I'm sure, after you finish, but there's some great compliments. Thank you. Very informative. Definitely took a lot away from this. I always ask myself if I want to be right or be happy. Thank you for sharing that. Great presentation. We'll be implementing some of the things that you've taught. A lot of really great things in there. We really appreciate everyone's time today and joining us for the webinar. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to this webinar will be published to our website once we have the transcripts, and we have to run those through HRSA. So once we get that approval, we're starting our webinar series again. We'll have our next webinar at the same time next month. Saul, any parting thoughts that you want to add just before we kind of close out here?
Lead with your heart. Do what you can with what you have, wherever you are, and try to maximize it. It's going to be different for any event, but do your part. Show up in a way that you can be heard and be sensitive to listening to theirs. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Saul. And thank you to everyone that joined us today. I did drop a link in the chat for our learning management system if you're interested. We appreciate getting to spend some time with you. Have a great day, everyone.